Good morning and welcome to the special edition of Carolina Week. I'm Akshay Gokul.
And I'm Madeline Amati. Today, we'll uncover a topic that is transforming our campus and raising new questions for the future. This is the DEI crackdown, changes and impacts at UNC.
Campuses like North Carolina, when they're talking about admission, they can't take race into consideration.
The end of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, localized at the nation's oldest public university. What this means for students.
I'm like, oh my goodness, am I going to lose my minor?
And educators.
I came to Carolina to do the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Carolina Week brings you a comprehensive look to changes in policy.
We as a community have to find a way to work around them.
Conflicting opinions.
To promote any one race or gender over the other is racist, sexist, and it's just offensive.
We cannot deny this. We cannot just say that everyone's going to be put at the same level, because that's not how it works.
And what comes next?
Do you think the DEI policy needs to come back?
I would always say yes to that, but I don't have that control.
We approach the one-year mark since the University of North Carolina system eliminated diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and spending. Today, we'll be unpacking these changes, the politics behind them, and what the future means for UNC. But first, let's tackle a question at the center of this. What is DEI? Well, it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as a set of values and related policies and practices focused on establishing a group culture of equitable and inclusive treatment and on attracting and retaining a diverse group of participants. Advocates see it as the path to equality. Critics see it as another form of discrimination. Let's start by talking about the history of DEI at UNC. The Chapel Hill Historical Society tells us that while Chapel Hill often reflected the conservative cultural norms of the South, the community hasn't been afraid to go against the grain. Here's how the Historical Society historian laid it out. Before, throughout, and after the Civil War, slavery embroiled the campus. The president of the university during the Reconstruction era supported an end to white supremacy that ultimately ended his tenure.
Poole was removed from office, impeached because of the fact that he had been a supporter of these policies.
In the 1900s, the university's culture began to part with the rest of the culture in the South, developing a reputation as a more liberal campus. Leaders like Frank Porter Graham, the Historical Society said, brought a progressive platform to the university. Graham became president of the university in 1930. While Graham supported racial integration, Graham felt like he didn't have the power to actually enact it.
Frank Porter Graham was supportive of many socially progressive projects. Still, he was limited in what he could do because the university is funded by the state.
The Chapel Hill Historical Society says the legacy of white supremacy and the university's involvement in the Civil War has been a significant issue for the campus, even in the 21st century. According to resources from the University Library, Silent Sam went up in 1913. The Confederate statue sparked debate. Was it a symbol of white supremacy or a nod to the past? Many demonstrations were held around the statue. Now, after more than 100 years later, activists removed the statue before the first day of classes in August 2018.
And it was only when students began to learn the history behind the statue that it became a controversial issue, which eventually led to it being removed. So there's a good example of how history affects activism.
Now that we know how these topics have been a part of our campus's history, we can turn to a more recent DEI policy on campus.
Central to this story, our university leaders. Let's break down how today's DEI controversies are playing out on campus. Prior to the repeal of the DEI policy, the UNC Board of Trustees diverted $2.3 trillion away from DEI programs. Shortly after, the UNC System Board of Governors, a right-leaning group, voted 22-2 to quash DEI offices and initiatives, implementing what they titled the Equality Within the University of North Carolina policy. The policy impacts all UNC System schools. This policy stated the university system's intent to maintain, quote, institutional neutrality and equality of opportunity. UNC Chapel Hill cut 20 DEI positions and refocused 27. This change came at a time when North Carolina did not require the university system to ban DEI. UNC student Adam Sharif was picked to be a DEI fellow for the 2024-2025 school year. Then, the program was canceled. I talked with Sharif to understand how he's moving forward.
Student Adam Sharif had work lined up for this school year. He was eager to make a difference in the UNC admissions office.
I wanted to do my best to sort of curb and soften the blow on, the effects that affirmative action had.
But in August, Sharif lost his job before it even began. Sharif was supposed to be a DEI fellow. The program partners fellows with UNC departments, schools, or offices. But after the UNC System Board of Governors repealed the DEI policy, the program ended too.
Obviously, we all, signed up for something, sent in our application, interviewed, put in time, set aside time to engage ourselves in a fellowship for the academic year. And so, to get accepted and to wait, all that time during the summer, and, just about when we're getting ready to start, that being just, cut and taken away was disappointing.
What the policy says is that if something is focused on student success,
then it can continue. Meet Leah Cox. She used to have a different title.
Previously, it was Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion.
That title was stripped when the DEI policy was removed from the UNC system. Cox says other DEI programs, like Women of Worth, were allowed to continue under different offices because they were, quote, focused on students. But the Office of Student Affairs did not take on the DEI fellows.
They would be open to anyone, but they also felt like we have a lot of programs already. We don't have to have a whole nother program when we have programs that are leadership programs within student affairs.
After serving in similar roles at the University of Mary Washington and Towson University, Cox says she came to UNC to continue work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. She says she stayed because there is still work to do.
Talk to your SGA president and representatives. Schedule meetings to talk with the chancellor. Schedule meetings to talk with our system president, Peter Hans.
Last May, Hans said in a public statement that, quote, ensuring that everyone is included and supported is core to our mission as a public institution. He continues saying, but it is not the job of the university to decide all the complex and multidimensional questions of how to balance and interpret identity. These are vigorously contested ideas in both our democracy and on our campuses. Now, Sharif is the president of the Black Student Movement, remaining involved on campus. He says, unlike other programs, the DEI Fellows Program, which focused directly on diversity, equity, and inclusion, was difficult to rebrand. Nonetheless,
the program should still exist, for sure.
And we'd like to clarify that the Board of Trustees diverted $2.3 million, not trillions. We apologize for that inaccuracy. Now, Vice Provost Leah Cox says the removal of the DEI policy is sad, and she says there is more work to be done ensuring that all students feel welcome. DEI continues to play a critical role in the broader political conversation as reforms at the national, state, and local levels aim to redesign how DEI shows up in our day-to-day. We bring you now to the politics behind DEI. Immediately after taking office, President Trump announced multiple executive orders aimed at getting rid of DEI programs of any kind. The first made DEI programs in the federal government illegal. The order bans DEI mandates, policies, programs, preferences, and activities. It also called for the immediate termination of DEI departments or positions. An executive order released the next day required an end to affirmative action for federal contractors and subcontractors. It also encouraged private sector employers to reconsider their voluntary DEI programs. Amidst federal changes to DEI initiatives, the Trump administration is also cracking down on immigration and student visas. Our reporter, Catherine Dehart, found that people opposing DEI and immigration reflect a key change in American politics.
So we're living in the apartment where my roommate used to live before he lost his visa and left the country.
That's Philip Vasto, a senior at NC State University. Vasto says his former roommate, Saleh Al-Gurad, was notified in March that his student visa was terminated. Last month, the Trump administration directed the termination of student visas at universities across the country. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the crackdown is geared towards student protesters and students with a criminal history.
We are not going to be importing activists into the United States.
He wasn't somebody that you would consider to be a political activist in any way.
Vasto says Gurad decided to return to Saudi Arabia and says he's ready to move on with his life. But Vasto still has questions.
The Trump administration was initially saying that they're targeting people who are vocal over issues like Palestine, whereas my roommate never expressed any kind of opinion on that. So how can he be considered part of that executive order and lose his visa?
UNC political science professor Mark Hetherington says that increased immigration has never been particularly popular amongst Americans. And alongside the increasing opposition to DEI efforts, Hetherington says the shifts represent a peak moment of polarization across the country. Hetherington says that issues like diversity and race create tension in American politics because of how differently people see the world.
Well, DEI programs are motivated, by the idea that societal forces are really important to understanding the inequalities that exist in the world.
Hetherington says many conservatives tend to see the world in terms of personal responsibility over someone's life and outcomes, making DEI efforts sometimes seem unfair.
America will once again become a merit-based country.
And liberals, on the other hand, tend to see the world with more societal responsibility.
When any one of us is held down, we're all held back.
The result of the variation? Polarization, misunderstanding, and conflict.
When people on the left, liberals, see conservatives saying, hey, look, the differences that we have are because of, say, personal responsibility, not societal responsibility. People on the left look at that and like, man, that's racism. But people on the right are like, no, that's just the way that I view everything in the world. It's not really racism, and I don't appreciate you calling me a racist.
According to Hetherington, these issues have gained attention because conservative politicians found them captivating and attracted many voters. For Vasto, the recent visa terminations reflect that.
That's just further proof that we're living in a very divisive time where people feel that a lot of people feel a certain kind of entitlement where they believe that the American dream is all for themselves and not for the immigrant, not for people who come from other countries.
Vasto says the response to his roommate's story has been mixed. Empathy from some, insults from others.
I believe that this was targeted towards a person's nationality because he was from Saudi Arabia, and there was another student from Saudi Arabia who was also swept up in this action.
Moving forward, Vasto believes international students should consider their safety and the state of American universities before coming to study here.
They believe that anyone who is not a citizen is someone who's taking advantage of the system, and they believe that only once you're a citizen do your rights actually matter. And to me, those people are un-American.
A recent Pew Research poll found that half of Americans say just some of illegal immigrants should be deported, and most Americans say deportations shouldn't take place at churches or schools.
The whole notion that some, people, who come into the country may have an idea that, they might do us harm, that's something that I think a lot of people are worried about. But that students shouldn't be able to go home to see their families in the summer because they're afraid that they can't get back into the country, I don't see a lot of Americans thinking, yeah, let's do that.
Vasto and Hetherington agree. The outlook for international students in DEI in the United States is uncertain. In Chapel Hill, I'm Catherine Dehart.
Here at UNC, 6 students had their visas terminated. The names of those students have not been released.
As we see changes to DEI being initiated by the federal government and institutions, state legislators are also playing a critical role in shaping DEI at public colleges and universities. Now let's break this down because North Carolina is not the only state making big changes to DEI policies. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott signed into law a bill banning DEI offices from public universities. Similarly, in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis prohibited the state's public universities from spending on DEI programs. Now, here in North Carolina, a bill to ban DEI in higher education is making its way through the legislature. But changes to DEI in the state are not exclusive to higher education. The legislature is pursuing legislation challenging DEI initiatives in K-12 schools and state and local government. As universities across North Carolina reassess their approach to diversity initiatives, Republican leaders are calling it a return to merit-based approach. Our Sarah Jens reports.
As universities across North Carolina reassess their approach to diversity initiatives, Republican leaders are calling it a return to a merit-based approach. North Carolina Republican Chairman Simmons says these changes follow the Supreme Court's 2023 ruling against race-conscious admissions.
When the Supreme Court ruled campuses like North Carolina, when they're talking about admission, they can't take race into consideration.
At the state level, Republican lawmakers have introduced legislation targeting DEI programs. Senate Bill 227, filed by Republican Senator Phil Berger, aims to eliminate DEI officers and staff from education institutions entirely. The bill has passed the state Senate and is currently under review in the House. It identifies 12 devising concepts it seeks to remove from education, including ideas that meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist, and the belief that the U.S. was founded to oppress certain groups. Cody Miller, vice chairman of the National Federation of College Republicans, says these changes promote fairness.
To promote any one race or gender over the other is racist, sexist, and, it's just offensive in every way.
Chairman Simmons says the goal isn't to reduce diversity, but to change how it is achieved.
Making sure that they capture not just, what's based upon your skin color or what you're coming from a demographic perspective, but being able to capture everybody's experience, but more importantly also the merit by which they would be considered for applications.
If Senate Bill 227 passes, Chairman Simmons says it will be up to each institution to decide how to redirect DEI resources. Sarah Jens, Carolina Week.
Chairman Simmons emphasizes the primary focus remains on electing more Republicans for the implementation of this merit-based approach.
With policies continuing to evolve and the community adjusting to a new reality, just one question remains: what happens next?
I suspect that we'll just continue to see this kind of doubling down that we've been seeing on these, various different themes, and get ready for more of the same.
DEI doesn't have to go away because the university says that they're not going to fund it anymore. It's been around before them and it'll be around after, and we can do it if they can't.
So I think it makes us, one, concerned about how many people will be able to participate, but also it allows us to just advocate and be louder voices for our community here on campus.
I think we have to move forward and still foster and pursue the spirit and concept of diversity.
I still value making sure that our students feel like they have a home.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this special edition of Carolina Week.
Carolina Week will be back in the fall.